Okay, right, cool. Good afternoon and welcome to Off Lead with Stuart and Emma. We're back again. We've been a while since me and Emma have been back on.
Yeah, apologies. Kind of Christmas and stuff.
Yeah, Christmas and New Year. But we are very lucky to be joined by Greg Derrett, which we think is pretty impressive to get him on doing something like this. Greg is currently the Team GB head coach, is it, or manager? Would you prefer, or what do they say?
Yeah, I guess they'd call it GB manager at the moment.
GB
So
manager?
yeah. So
Cool. Which is a big thing for you, I think. Yeah.
it was a big decision to make when the job came up. I mean, I'd been involved in the team as a competitor for 20 years, so it was kind of I guess, a watershed moment to make the decision to change from being running the dog to actually managing the team. So, but yeah, it was something that I've been fairly passionate about GB for 20 years, and felt that maybe some of my own personal competitive desire had dropped a little bit to put the work in that you need to do for that level. But also still wanted to be involved, and also maybe arrogantly felt that I could do a good job. So, um, and also for me, it's a challenge. It's a challenge. It's something I like to challenge myself and do something new, and it's something I hadn't really been involved in before at that level. So yeah, it came along and we took the jump.
Was it an interview process, or was it something you had to sort of apply for, or?
Yeah, it's quite a lengthy process. I mean, they kind of have their procedures and stuff. So for every single job, including all my own GB management team, we had to put it out to application. Um, and then for each of my positions that they brought on, we had to interview three people, um, and narrowed it down to three, and then interviewed three, and then made a choice with the committee for the management job. I'm not sure how many interviewed, but I believe it was at least 4 or 5 other people. Um, I had to have two different interviews, presentation on my plan for selection, and other ideas what I thought I could bring to the team, how I thought we should manage the team, budget constraints and things like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's fairly lengthy, a lengthy 6-week process, I guess, from applying, or the deadline to apply, to actually being offered the job.
Yeah.
That makes it really professional, though, doesn't it? That
Yeah,
congratulations, first of all, but to go through that interview process makes it a very professional organisation, I think.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously the kennel have got their procedures and their rules and regs, as well as being a corporate business, if you want to. It pretty much is now, with a limited company that it is. But it also, it was good for me. I mean, it was great for me because it was in COVID, so it was the start of COVID, so I was bored anyway because everything was stopped.
Yeah.
But it made me put a lot of effort into how I would select the team, how I would run the team. So the process actually, the interview process actually was a lot of the foundation work for what I was then going to do for the next X number of years. So yeah, the interview was definitely thorough, but definitely I actually found really helpful. And also interviewing the candidates that we then did, when we spent 3 weeks solid interviewing people, because we've got 8 positions. So we interviewed 24 people over 3 weeks for the positions.
Okay,
With us. And that was great as well, because it was really interesting to hear different people's opinions on what they should do in those specific roles, what they would bring. And it also allowed us to, although we had to appoint one person, we could actually use some of the stuff that we learned from these other people, what they would have done. We thought, well, that's a good idea, or
yeah.
hadn't thought about that. So yeah, I've never really been involved in that side of the business world before, because being self-employed, and when I've employed somebody, it's been a case of, I like you and I know you do a good job. Do you want a job?
Yeah.
Rather than doing an interview. So it was all brand new for me, but it was enjoyable. And obviously with COVID as well, it gave us something to focus on for.
Yeah.
Yeah, bored, weren't you?
Yeah. I think I might have gone mad without the GB management role coming up. So,
but your passion, in following on from that, the passion that you see when you go to these events is really recognisable. So congratulations, and
you.
yeah. What is it that you're looking to bring into the team, Greg?
I mean, I've got some goals. Some are private goals on for the team, some are sort of ones I'm happy to share. I mean, the first thing we really wanted to do was to get GB back to a position where we are competitive throughout all heights. So this first 20, obviously we had 2 years of no competition, but then 2022, I think the really pleasing thing, Large didn't get a medal, which is not pleasing, but was really nice that we got medals with the adult team in medium and small, which hadn't been done for 7 or 8 years. So that was nice. But also the large were, I mean, knocking on the door, we had 4 dogs in the top 10 of the jumping at the AWC, for example. That was my first initial, or the whole management team. We want to be competitive in all three, and now 4 heights this year. So I think that was a good start. I'd like GB to be respected again, like it was. I felt it lost a bit of respect throughout, not just Great Britain, but also internationally. We were seen as a force, I think, and we'd lost that a little bit. So um, we got some pretty good feedback after 2022 from other team managers that were like, "Wow, you guys have worked hard in COVID." So it was recognised by them. So that was nice. We've still got a long way to go. Um, we've still got a huge amount of change needed in British agility, I think, to actually make us as good as the Germans or Czech Republic that are the leading forces, or those kind of countries. Whether we ever will be able to with our agility in Great Britain, I'm not sure, because it's such a different sport. It really is. It's a comparison I've used a lot, but rugby union and rugby league, and I think we play rugby league and they play rugby union. And although it's similar, it's got vast differences in the sport, and that I think really does hinder us. Um, so yeah, that was my real goal: is to get us back to be competitive, get respect back, get respect back from handlers. I think a lot of the handlers that we'd lost respect for the process, we'd lost respect for um, competing for Great Britain. And it was more about ourselves rather than representing our country. And I think that's a really important thing, is to want to represent Great Britain rather than be there for an individual. Which is you are there for an individual, but you need to do what's best for your country when you're competing for your country. You do have the support of people sitting at home watching agility, and I think it's important that we bring that back for our handlers to remember that she's quite a privileged position to be, to represent your country, and it's a cool thing to do, and it can give you some fantastic memories, and also financially, if you do well internationally, there's a good amount of money to be made now in dog agility as a central presenter. So
because most of the team they're all sort of professional dog trainers or handlers now, aren't they? So it's in their interest, I suppose, to
absolutely
do well, really.
I mean, there's a bit of pushback about how much it costs to compete internationally and how much you have to give, but basically, to compete internationally, you need to be very, very committed. It's one of the reasons that I stepped from being a handler to a manager, is that my time constraints running businesses that I do, and also my age constraint is, if I'm being blunt, is you have that much more work in when you hit 40s to compete with people in their 20s, because you have to do extra training and they don't need to do. So there's a lot of time and effort. But sorry.
Wait until you're over 50.
Yeah, well, that's I mean, sometimes I think, oh, maybe I made the wrong decision. I'll come back, and then I watch some of the courses that we're now getting, and I'm like, nah, maybe not. It is a more physically challenging sport than it was 10 years ago, without doubt. And and that is a consideration. It's not to say you can't when you're in your 50s or even 60s. It just means that you need to be putting a lot more either dog training skills in for that distance control, or a lot more work on your own personal fitness, which is when you're in your 20s, you probably don't really think about very much when you do a 30-second run. But it does increase the amount of workload, I think.
So is there anything, Greg, that you think from a UK, from agility in the UK, do you think anything that goes on a general weekend impacts the higher level, or do you think the higher level impacts the lower level?
Yeah, I think I think we need more of a professional sport, personally. I think not as in finance professional, but as in attitude professional.
Yeah.
If you look at a lot of the way that sports run, the top level create rules that then feed down to the lower levels that improves the whole sport. And I think the problem that we've got is that agility tends to look after the lower level too much.
Yeah.
And it weakens it down, which doesn't progress the sport. And I think the problem with agility, you've got a very fine balance. You've got we have to look after the bread and butter people, if you want to call them that, the hobbyists that actually keep the sport running, and also are massively important for our sport to keep it running. and also get a huge amount of enjoyment and the benefit to their dogs. But we've also got an elite level of handler that we also need to be looking after. And I think we're almost getting to a point, I think, where we need to look at sort of two structures: one for the elite level handler who wants to compete internationally or nationally, and one who is the hobbyist. And at the moment, we don't really have a structure that's looking after either. So I do think there's room for a very big overview of agility in this country to look at what we're trying to achieve. And maybe that is we don't want to look after the elite, but we make that statement, or we don't want to look after the hobbyists, we make that statement. But I think it needs to be looking at like Premiership football. Always, what the rules come down to Sunday League under 11s, and that's but you don't make the rules at Sunday League under 11s for the Premiership teams. I think that's kind of what we need to look at. There's all sorts of things I would change personally from the chemical grading system. I think needs reviewing, the progress needs reviewing, course design, judges training needs massively reviewing, measuring needs completely reviewing. And I think also one of my actually biggest things is our qualifiers and heats needs a bit of an overview as well, because we used to have a season and look after our dogs from, we'd compete for our qualifiers April to September, but now you can find a champ in January, December. You can find Olympic qualifiers from January to December. You can find Cliff Singles nearly from, I think, March to December now. We don't really have a season, and I think that doesn't want to help the standard, but also doesn't actually look after our dogs and handlers because of health and safety. Or health and safety might be the wrong word, but their fitness regimes and give them down periods. I'm massively into my football, and all you hear all the time is that managers complain that their players don't get enough downtime, and I think that's the same as agility. We don't now have an off season, and therefore we don't have downtime, which again doesn't help our handlers.
Yeah, I remember that when I first started, it was like, say, April through to September. That was it.
Yeah.
And then we had 6 months of doing not a lot, or training and keeping ourselves ticking over. Maybe the odd sort of, we used to have the like the Starters League and the Three Counties League at Kennel Club, where you get all your beginners together and do a few sort of winter leagues. But actual shows, we never went to a show in sort of October, November, December.
No, I mean, I'm not saying get rid of the shows in those months, but get rid of the really important runs in those months, so that if someone wants to do the show, cool, it's there for you. But for example, I went down to a show in December, British Wales in December, which had got CC, Olympia, and Creft Singles all on one day, probably the biggest day of the year in December. The week before Olympia. Now I used that as a prep really for. I'd been on the road for 3 months, so I hadn't really seen the dog for 3 months. So I used it as a nice warm up to get ready for Olympia. But a lot of people just kept their dogs really fit because it's a really important day. And if they hadn't got Olympia, well, why are their dogs fit at that time of year to be competing in those kind of events?
We've had this conversation before, haven't we, Stuart? Where even as handlers, you find, like Premiership football. I don't follow football, but you have one, like running a marathon. You never run a marathon really, because it's all training, and to try and keep that fitness up to a peak level is very, very difficult, isn't it? Especially all year round, because that's when the injuries are going to happen.
I think that's and also a mental game as well for dog and I mean, I've just had a successful Olympia, and I would say that one of the reasons is myself and my dog hadn't competed for 3 months pretty much, so we were very fresh mentally.
You did have a successful Olympia. Well done, forgot that. Congratulations on that.
It seems a few weeks ago now, but
it just seems ages ago.
Miles away, doesn't it? Months away.
Yeah, it does. Pre-Christmas is but I mean, I'm sure that mental freshness is something that I've always tried with my dogs, just because of the last 20 years I've travelled so much with work that they do have complete and utter downtime from agility, and so do I in respect of actually handling my dog. So it's something I think needs to look at.
Mind, can you?
Yeah, I think you've got to target events. You've got to be focused for those particular events, and it's not got. I mean, I think that's one of the problems with our CCs is that we have so many now that I messed this one up, I've got next week, and then I've got next week, and I've got next week. So we never put ourselves under pressure at CC anymore, because there's always one within 6 days or 7 days. And I think again, rather than targeting a few CCs and being really up for those, we sort of just drift along in our agility here a little bit. I think that's a big problem for our international handlers, is that they're not focused to win on a day. They want to get a CC, but they've got 40 opportunities. Well, when you get to World Cup, this is it. And this might
Yeah,
be your only opportunity for actually, you might not get back because it's so hard to get to World Cup at times. So, and I think therefore our handlers aren't used to it. I mean, going back in the day and sounding like an old man, but we used to have all these finals that we used to compete at in the summer. The Royal Canin, Tex Chunks, Spillers,
yeah,
Barber. These were all finals as well as Olympian Crufts where you had to go and win today, otherwise you're not. Doesn't matter. And I think we've lost that a little bit in our agility, which I'd love to see it brought back. I don't know how, because I think those days have gone where you've got finals and people chasing finals at big agricultural shows that used to be held at. But
yeah.
maybe a reduction of CCs might help. That is only 10 a year, and therefore you've got to target those ones you're actually at because they don't come along so much. Um,
I used
you
to
know,
love independent finals, I must admit. I mean, I've not been competing anywhere near as long as you guys, but I remember, I mean, Kit's now 8, kind of doing some of the what are considered the smaller
mm,
finals in preparation for maybe, hopefully, when I got into Olympia, I felt that it prepared him. But also, I wanted to kind of just change us back a little bit, going back to how our grassroots come in and how we should affect, obviously Stuart and I have both handled internationally, both compete, but we also train beginners, complete
mhm,
beginners, in an unregulated world. The pet dog trainer around the corner is also training agility with a treat in the hand
yeah,
and everything
yeah.
else. And it's how we as trainers can impact those grassroots people coming in. What you think that we could be doing to help the beginners coming in?
I think the problem with agility is, as you said, there's so many people doing training, um, and you've got your pet trainer around the corner through to your international handler, at the highest level training, um, and it's a really difficult balance. And I mean, I quit training as private training 2010 time, and one of the reasons I did it was because it was just so hard to balance your business with your methods, if you want to call it that, because I was very much into my basics and foundations, and the average person doesn't want to do that. They want to do the sexy stuff. Um, and to be a successful business, you need to keep the people there rather than go to the trainer who's 2 miles away doing sexy stuff, even though they don't understand that. And it's really difficult. So I think that's the problem. It's an unregulated business, which don't know how it ever becomes regulated, because who's to say who's a good agility trainer, who's a bad agility trainer, and everyone's opinion is going to differ on that. Who's going to put a qualification in that we all respect? Probably nobody. I
Yeah.
mean, would we, kennels do their accredited instructor? Do we have respect for that? Would the top level handler have respect for that? I don't know. I've never done it personally, so does that mean I'm a bad trainer or a good trainer? I mean, that's where we've got this unregulated business, which is difficult. I mean, I think in a perfect world, what we try and do is increase the standards a little bit of people that are at shows. I think the other problem we have with people making a living from agility is they need their clients to think they've achieved something, so they try and get them to the shows as quick as possible, which drops the standard. And that's that ugly balance between, again, business and professional training, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so whether we can have some sort of set standard a dog must achieve before it's allowed to actually go to an open show. I mean, maybe there's a lower level event it can be introduced to say, right, well, you need to pass through these not unaffiliated but low level shows, and if you can achieve clear rounds at these, then you can actually go to a normal kennel club show into grade one. So maybe there needs to, or we change our grading where grade
Yeah.
1 and 2 are not at shows; they're elsewhere, so that you've somehow proved yourself before you step into the competitive league. I mean, footballers have trials, but we don't have trials to get
They
you
do.
into
They do
football
that in
games.
Europe, don't they, Greg? They do that in some countries in Europe, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, there's I think there's more. Germany, for example, I think you have to pass like their equivalent of the Good Citizens test before you're allowed to compete. So you've got to show you go into a park and let your dog off the lead and it behaves. Well, I would not be critical of British agility, but I wonder what percentage of people can actually go into a park and let their dogs off the lead and
I was
recall
to say that
collection.
might be pretty easy to implicate as well, to say that everybody
Absolutely,
needs to do
yeah.
that.
You need to
I mean,
show your good citizen gold certificate before you can compete.
Even a
Yeah.
bridle, Stuart.
Or can you go to a dog agility show and in the exercise area let your dog off the lead and it comes back when you call it? You can actually implement it at agility shows or something. You know, do you have basic control of your dog? When you tell it to lie down, does it lie down or does it keep chasing the other dog? You know, it's those kind of, I
Yeah,
don't know whether we need something like that to try and increase standard at lower level that would then be a knock-on effect, and then we could make the higher level even higher because at the moment, by the time they've got basic recall, they've got to grade 5. You know, sort of thing, and I think it's sort of been a little bit negative sounding like that, but I do wonder whether that's something we could
It is
implement.
very true, and that's a real light bulb moment for me that I could actually implement as a trainer, because I've got a friend who is a citizenship examiner, so I could actually implement that quite easily. And as you've said that, I'm like, wow, why don't I do that? I do, obviously work on obedience and recall as well, but
we never.
I know I don't have to do it kind of legally or within the regs, but what a great thing to be able to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think forget dog agility. You know, how many dogs don't have the behavior skills to actually live their life safely because they break out doorways, they break through gateways, they run away, they go missing. I mean, how many times do we see posts about lost dogs? Probably just dogs that recalls that just run away. There's the odd one that gets freaked out and scared, but again, why is a freaked out and scared dog not running to its owner if the relationship is correct? Why is it running? So all those kind of life skills that would be massively beneficial. Forget agility, because who cares about agility if your dog's getting run over because it's run away from you?
Yeah.
You know,
We've had,
it's the importance of that. And I do think we've lost those. You know, when I first got into agility, dog training was a dog training sport, and I would struggle to say it, but I don't know whether we are a dog training sport anymore. I think we're more of a dog handling sport. With a bit of dog training thrown in, certainly at the lower levels, that's for sure. It's mainly handling, it's not dog training.
we've had this discussion before, Greg. Me and Emma definitely have had it, and I can't remember whether we spoke to other people, but we were saying like about agility shows, and if we take a simple action like a start line wait, a sit, a down, or a stand, that's all you're asking. Forget the agility part of it, and we're saying that all of these dogs that can't do that action, simple action, in that environment shouldn't be in that environment.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've said this before, haven't we, Emma? About sits and stay. If they can't do a simple sit, a simple action in the environment they're in the wrong environment. That's
that most definitely. I mean, I think the problem we've also got our judges have started to put number one and jumping away from the ring, so that now you don't need a start line to run because they don't want to wait for people to mess around with their start lines.
yeah.
But to me, what's the whole point of judging is you're there to test the dog, test the skills, and now we're doing these number ones jumping out of the ring so that no one has to practice their start line. So there's even less reason to train the dog to stay when they tell it, and it's just a vicious circle of watering down dog training ability.
It's quite interesting actually, listening and thinking at the same time. When I used to do my foundation courses about 8 years ago, I used to spend 3 or 4 weeks doing obedience. And I don't do that. And maybe I don't do that because I feel pressurized. Not pressurized, that's the wrong word, because I am a single thinker, but I don't do it anymore because you feel like that person wants to see their dog go through a tunnel, or that person wants to see and you just feel
they want the sexy stuff. Yeah, I mean, the training that I used to do, it was they had to pass through, and Stu, you might have actually been one of those who had to pass through certain foundation standards before you got on equipment, and if you didn't, you weren't allowed to go out of foundation class. And I was pretty strict with that, but it was poor business because I would lose clients a lot because they were like, "Oh, my friend's doing dog walk now," although they were on a lead being dragged across the dog walk. I'm still doing circle work or start line weights, yet my friend's doing all the equipment on a lead. And that person, and it's really difficult.
I think
it's a
the last real foundation class I did was probably years ago. I started off with eight handlers or 8 dogs in the group, and it was just a basic 6-week foundation course. Wasn't anything special, and by the end of the 6 weeks I had 2 left.
I mean, it's probably harder now than it was when I gave up 10 years ago, 12 years ago.
I always say that if you get 100% start, you'll end up with like 30% will give up in the first week.
Absolutely.
And
the problem is as well now, I think with social media doesn't help us, because your clients, should I say, that you're keeping well the foundations, they're seeing so many other people that they believe are on the same level with the same sort of dog doing other things. So they sort of then go, well, why aren't I doing that? I'm going to go to that person instead because that's what I get.
Yeah.
And that's only a 30-second, and that's a 30-second video clip that they've gone.
Absolutely.
You know.
Yeah, all my friends going to a show where I'm not going to show yet. Or my friend with my litter mate is doing this, and I'm not, you know, and it's
I remember doing a reward and reinforcement seminar, and it was honestly a game changer for me and Herbie going back all those years, like a lot of years. He's now 13, 14. And I still refer back to that sometimes, even with my own dogs. I'll problem solve my own dogs. And I learned so much just by sitting in the classroom. You say lots of people still want to do the academic side of it, but you know, right, I'm going to do if somebody can't get a blind, I'm like, right, I'm going to do a session without a dog. You know, we are going to have a whole session without dogs, and you're going to lead your partner around the course. They're like, what?
Yeah. I mean, again, I refer to football. How many football training sessions don't actually have a football majority?
Yeah.
Which but yeah, take the dog out of average dog agility, and people are weird, but where are the real skills come from? And for human beings,
like three old fogies, don't we?
Yeah. Remember the days.
Yeah, very much.
So just going back to that a little bit then, Greg, from like you say, we've got grassroots, elite. Do you think it should be like a two-tier system, so like inclusive, exclusive, that sort of thing, or?
Well, I mean, I think agility needs to look at how do we cater for both, because at the moment we cater for neither. We've got this mishmash where we've got a bit of hobbyist and a bit of elitist, and I know I'm not allowed to say the word elite, but I don't understand why not. Every sport has elite handlers or elite athletes.
Yeah.
Why agility is not allowed to say the word elite is beyond me. I just don't get it. Especially when we've got international teams, they are elite.
And it's the elite handlers that are the ones that people should be looking up to.
Yeah.
And like heroes, those sort of things. That's what we have in sport anyway.
I think we need to make sure that our elite recognise that the grassroots are important, and that's something that's not always the case, and therefore elite do get a bad name because sometimes they don't care about the grassroots or the hobbyist. They are probably the most important person because they're the people that are actually paying for the sport. They'll be the people that pay for the development because of their numbers, not because they pay more, but just because there's more of them. And that's something we need. Whether we need two structures or whether we just need the hobbyists ought to be able to do the agility they want to do, but maybe certain shows are described as, and Kenilworth tried to do it with the Premier shows, but they've not really, it hasn't worked in my opinion, just because it's too watered down. There's too many dogs in grade 7. There's not enough good judges for grade 7. The facilities we're offering for grade 7 aren't enough. I mean, it all really boils down, in my opinion, to the lack of money in British agility. As you guys know, I've just got out by selling UKA, and that was the main reason. Is that I don't think we can run the sport well with the finances that we've got to do it. And I'm lucky enough that I've got business elsewhere. But the difference that highlights the difference that when you've got the money to spend properly, you can run brilliant events. When you haven't got the money, you can't have good judges. You don't have good equipment. You're constantly looking to try and cut corners to try and actually break even. And it's the huge issues we've got. But also it's I don't know how you solve that, because one of the brilliant things of British agility is that it's cheap. It's available to all, which is a great thing. But it's also hindering. It's hugely hindering the sport now when you're paying £5 a class, which really should be £15 a class, in my opinion, to actually for the facilities that people want. And that's the problem, is that we want indoor astroturf with Gallican equipment, and we want top European judges to come in or top European judges to pay for these designs. Well, that all comes at a cost. When if you don't have the income to, how are you affording those? And that is the problem. Sponsors are more and more limited now, or more and more spread out as well. So it is a bit of a vicious circle, which sounds depressing, but there must be solutions. But it does need, I think, some real rejigging of everything and replanning.
I do think you're right with the organised somewhere. I think somebody like maybe that somebody needs to bite that bullet and go, right, I'm putting this event on. It's £15 a run. This is the location. This is the venue. And then and giving people that choice, because nobody's actually
Yeah.
done that yet, have they?
I mean, there's bits and pieces. I mean, there's some European judges over the last weekend on an AstroTurf venue. I'm not going to say the names, but probably everyone knows where that is. Good venue. Couple of weeks before GB tryouts, their entry looked terrible. They've got 20 something in the large, 20 something in the intermediate.
Yeah,
I mean, and I was like, well, why? What? There's 100 odd dogs trying out for GB. Why aren't all 100 not there? Because it's kind of
perfect. Yeah, it was perfect training.
it's a
Yeah,
strange
perfect.
one. But then there's other shows where people can go and get their move ups. And
Yeah,
it's so hard to move up. That's probably their priorities. And again, that's one of our issues. I think we just have so many shows that there's just so many options that we don't have the that level of stuff that we need to be saying, right, well, there aren't any options, so we'll go to that show. Um, I don't. It's just so difficult when you've got an unregulated business
yeah.
with shows. I mean, if you think anyone can really now put a show on, and that is
And
the
now
problem.
because we've got so many organisations as well, like you say, you've got your kennel club and whatever. You've got UK
Yeah,
Activity. You've got there's several different unaffiliated
yeah,
sort of organisations that put on little shows here, there, and everywhere, which aren't necessarily getting you up the grades as such, but they're giving you an opportunity to compete. They give you an
yeah,
opportunity to get a rosette. You
yeah,
get
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, and I think that's where we need to look at is that perhaps we only have one show a weekend or within a certain radius that offers grade 5 and above or
yeah,
something like that. It's some way to hobbyists can go to the unaffiliated or the local the shows or the move or we would call move up shows, which is probably a bit degrading not to them, but everyone knows what I mean by that, I'm sure. They go to those shows, but once you get to grade 5, okay, now there's only one or two shows throughout the country where we all have to go to get to grade 7. So when we get to grade 7, we deserve to be in grade 7. Whereas I've certainly my last 2 dogs, if not 3 dogs, getting to grade 7 has almost been like disappointing when I haven't made it that weekend. Whereas it used to be a massive achievement. You'd celebrate getting to grade 7, or they was called advanced. Down the local club, we would all bring cake and beer, and you'd celebrate someone getting into advanced in grade 7. Now it's if someone doesn't, it's always seen as a failure, which
yeah,
is completely opposite way to what it should be. To get to grade 7, it should be seen as a massive success. And I think most people now, when they're trying to get into from 6 to 7, the weekend they don't actually make it, they go home disappointed. The weekend they make it, it's like, oh, thank God for that. It's a relief more than
yeah,
and I
Yeah.
think that's
yeah,
a
So I'm going to throw a little
huge cultural difference.
because I think what you're saying is right. I think there should be a split. However, if you look at a young dog coming out, I think
Mm-hmm.
an awful lot of pressure to get it weaving, to get contacts, to get everything else. My young dog, for whatever reason, she's not weaving yet, but I took her, she's 18 months old. I wanted to start giving her ring experience. So I managed to go to a little local show that I didn't, wouldn't probably not normally go to, but it gave her some really nice ring experience and I was under no pressure. Same as like UKA is, you can just go in, reward your start line, reward a few jumps. If we split it, how would I then run? I guess I'd have to make a decision in the fact that actually she can't get that ring experience until such time as she's weaving and got in contacts as well.
I don't think it needs to be split to the point you couldn't go there. If you've got a young dog, why can't you go to the local hobbyist show? But what I'm saying is your top level dog, why is that running at the local hobbyist show? Maybe that shouldn't be. So if you go there for your young dog, you've gone there for your young dog. Now,
Yeah,
should your grade 7 international dog be running at that show? Or maybe there is a class for you to let your dog go. But what I wouldn't want to see, or what I don't think we should see, is at these small little shows, one, you could win into grade 7 with a grade 6 dog when there's hardly anyone there, because now we're watering grade 7 down, or whatever we call our top level in the future. Um, and secondly, I wouldn't want to see a qualifier there, because the
yeah,
reason you go to that show is for, let's designate what those shows are for. Okay, this show is for giving people a fun day out, a bit of, a little bit of competition experience. You might be able to progress out of the lowest grades but it shouldn't be about, okay, you can actually get to the top grade today, that next weekend you can stand at the biggest show in the country on the CC class when you've
Yeah.
won your way up here, where there's no one here to beat or compete against, or judges the course was terrible or really dumbed down because it's a whole obvious show.
A limit, doesn't there, from grade 6 to 7 of how many dogs you've got to beat on that time to get your final wins? There certainly needs.
Yeah, I mean, whether it's almost a standard of course as well. I think is needed. You know, to get into grade 7, you should be able to demonstrate that you actually got grade 7 skills. At the moment, you know, grade 6, the variation in course we all know is huge. And I think again you'll see some dogs in the CC that you're like, how have they got here? Because they've got no skills, but they've probably gone to a show where the grade 6 has been an up and down course with a judge that stands in the middle not looking at the contacts properly, and now suddenly they're standing on a course Neil Ellis has designed, and it's destroyed. You know, they've got no chance because they haven't got those skills, and that's where we haven't set a standard for. I think we need a standard for each progression. What we actually look into. What should a grade 5 dog look like? What should a grade 6 dog look like? What should a grade 7 dog look like? There's nothing like that. We don't have anything like that. You know,
Yeah.
what should an international dog look like? I mean, we've got the Open Showcase in a few weeks, and we put on the schedule where you should only be entering this if you really feel this dog is ready to win internationally. And I think it'd be quite interesting to see who's actually entered this, to see what their dogs look like. You know, and a couple of the judges we've got, one of them is definitely Semcamp, and everyone's seen as definitely Semcamp. Of course, they're probably as difficult as you're ever going to meet.
Yeah.
You know, it'll be interesting to see whether any of these, how many of these dogs that run to the Open Showcase have actually got the skills to get around a course like that. And that's maybe because they don't understand what, when we say international level, they might think their dog is international level because they've just won grade 6 at a very small show. But actually, when they come and see what international level is, it might maybe frighten them or give them a reality check, or you know, it is that kind of thing which we don't have, and I think that's what we need. We need to set standards better. So, and again, it's just difficult though, because
Sounds like a Greg Derrett, if you ask me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just. I mean, it's a problem I feel with the sport here is we're too big and not regulated enough in all aspects.
Yeah.
And that's probably the crux of where it comes down. Not enough
So,
money, too many people, and not enough regulations throughout.
so
That's got
to wind this up, to finish this off, Greg. So what you're saying is that everything at the moment, especially, let's say, no, I'm not going to say the kennel club, but agility in general needs an overhaul, doesn't it? An overhaul of some sort.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really want to get too much into UKA, but one of the reasons that we decided to sell it was that I ran out of ideas. I didn't know what to do. I literally didn't know what we could do next um, to change things, to alter agility. I think UK altered agility a lot in the last 20 years in Britain. You know, a lot of the rule changes we've made, you'll now see established chemical rules, you know, fourth height being one of them, obviously. But you know, getting rid of the flat tunnel, getting rid of contacts, and I just get seeing training in the ring, which is now sort of given. But I mean, theoretically, still not meant to, but everyone pretty much repeats equipment now and trains at chemical shows. So those kind of ideas and rule changes that we brought in, I think, have made a difference. But to come up with something again to change the sport, I basically run out of ideas, and I think that's probably where we all are, and maybe where the chemical bar is, that we've got stuck. Where are we going? You know, and there's no point having a 5-year strategy because that doesn't really work. We need to sit down and come up with what are we going to do now, and where do we want to be in 5 years, maybe. But
I do like citizenship idea.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, but I think, you know, it's a top to bottom review we need, you know, and in all aspects, and I think there's people that are interested in doing that, and I hope the Kennel Club will take on the idea. The problem obviously is that whoever's going to make these decisions, there's going to be people that disagree with it. Whatever rule change you make, and that's also a massive issue in British agility. And one of the other reasons that I got out is that the social media trolling is so horrible in this country. Whatever rule change you make, there's going to be a lot of people against it. there'll be a lot of people for it, but there's going to be many people against it, and it's quite a vile place when you make decisions that people don't like.
And it ends up being whoever shouts the loudest, isn't it?
Yeah, and social media here is very, we took a stance about 4 years ago when people started slating us. We would just, that's it, you're done. We don't want to do business with you. So we'd kick them off our social media pages and we kick them out. We'd kick them out because it's terrible business. It's terrible business. But it was a way of us trying to survive.
At the end of the day, you're a real person.
Yeah, exactly. And even though I don't take a lot of it personally, we just got, when you have to monitor social media at 11 o'clock at night just before you go to bed, and first thing you do in the morning is monitor social media, try and make sure no fires are starting that are going to cause you a lot of grief, and you do that 24/7, it just gets old. It just got really old, and I think that's probably the problem also with the kennel club. You've got people that, our ARC members are volunteers, pretty much doing it for free. They might get their expenses paid, but they don't get making any money out of this. They're working for free, and they probably get a huge amount of abuse as well. So at least when I was making money, I could then say, well, all right, I've made some money out of this. And obviously, as agility's changed the last 10 years in Britain, the money dropped down a lot, and it got to the point where, okay, well, actually, it's not worth the abuse that we take, or the hours we have to put in to monitor this stuff. So that's also agility. People need to, I think, need to be very aware in Britain that the way they behave at shows towards judges, towards organisers, towards each other, also has got quite a negative impact on the rule changes, because everyone's scared to make change because they're gonna get picked on, or just abused, and there's you take abuse, and at the end of the day you start thinking, I don't want to do this anymore. And I think that's something that agility people in Britain, it's there's worldwide there's a bit of negativity, but I think Britain definitely has a culture at the moment that's it's way worse than any other country that I'm involved in, and that's might be because though we've got a lot of unhappy people because agility isn't catering for anybody; it's catering a bit of a mishmash. So we're not making anybody happy, and I think that's possibly the issue that we've really got, is that we need to relook at reviewing it so that we can make the hobbyist happy and the elite happy, and that would reduce a lot of probably the unhappiness and redirected aggression if we're talking about dog training, I guess. Back to where it is, because they're actually going to start getting the service they want, and the sport they want, and I think
we're back to my rose-coloured glasses.
Yeah. That's quite a negative interview, really, isn't it?
No. It's been good though. I think some really cool points in there. I think for everybody, obviously, when we get people watching and listening to this, they should pick up on some really cool ideas, definitely ideas, and food for thought, really, about what, not necessarily what's going on, but what we do personally, individually, on a day-to-day basis, a competition, training wise, whatever, what we're actually looking for and what we're actually trying to achieve.
Yeah, I think people, again, what do they really want agility to be? And we all want agility to be what it is for our particular dog at this moment. We've all got that. We all want rule changes that will suit us now. But I think sometimes when we start shouting about rule changes, we need to think about other people, as in the sport itself. What actually, if I want this, yes, it's good for me, but actually, what's the detrimental side to that? Why is this rule not in, or why is that rule in place? What's it actually doing? And changing rules, there's two sides to every argument, as we all know in whole walks of life. But in agility as well, when you've got a rule change in, or you make a rule change, it's going to benefit some, it's going to impact others negatively. But what's the actual benefit for agility long term is the key, and I think we need more thought from everybody on that. Where are we going, and where do we want agility to go? We don't want to be like obedience in 10 years' time, where our numbers have dwindled and we're dying of sport, or working trials, which is pretty much dead now. And that's where agility, we don't want it to go, or it's changed to something completely different. There's a place for hoopers, but we don't want agility to become hoopers. Hoopers is hoopers, and we need to be careful that we're not going in that kind of line, and keeping it separate. Or you might find hoopers is the number one sport in agility in Great Britain. Sorry, in 5 years' time, who knows? I mean, and agility is dying a death. So we all need to be aware of what we've got, what we want, and where we want to go with it. I think in all aspects, from the people making the rules down to the hobbyist posting on Agility Net tomorrow. All those people have that influence.
Yeah. Perfect. Right, I think we'll leave that there. It's been brilliant. Really, really cool. No, it's cool.
Thank
you. Yeah, we could have gone for a long time, but yeah. But thank you very much for taking the time and joining us.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and I think good luck with your future endeavours with Team GB, and hopefully that builds some more success for them as well. And then hopefully that will filter down, and we might see a few more changes ahead.
Yeah, fingers crossed that we got a great sport, and a bit negatives on what we were saying today, but I do think we've got great sport with a lot of great people in it, and we need to try and keep it before it gets to a point where it does implode. So I think we should just all be aware now. A bit like global warming, really, isn't it? Let's all do our bit now, and we can make sure it survives forever.
Yeah, absolutely. Right,
thank you
very much for that.
Right.
Speak to you all soon. Thank you.